I just decided I really wanted to do something again that was serving a higher purpose than my own career.
Welcome to Drop and Give Me 20, where you learn keys to entrepreneurial success as Lindsey interviews business owners with military backgrounds on what works and what doesn't. Listen as they focus on the stories, both challenges and wins, that military entrepreneurs have faced in growing their businesses.
Welcome to another episode of Drop and Give Me 20 podcast. I am your host, Lindsey. I am joined today by the wonderful Dwayne Paro. Dwayne and I have been trying to hit record on this podcast interview for quite some time, and I'm very excited to introduce Dwayne to you guys. I love having fellow podcasters on and sharing this space with other military entrepreneurs. Dwayne is a veterans coach. He is also an author, a speaker, and he is with Landmark Life Coaching. His podcast is called Charlie Mike Podcast. So good evening at this point, Dwayne. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh my goodness, you're welcome. And I wish everybody could see us, but you have a legit podcast setup right now going on. I can see you. You've got the nice mic and, you've got everything going on. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, I'd love for folks to actually hear about your podcast and then maybe introduce a little bit more about Landmark Life Coaching.
Sure. The Charlie Mike podcast is something I started as a passion project this past February. When I coach veterans, I'm running into a common theme that there's a lack of veterans going into the entrepreneurial space and post 9/11. And so one thing that I've recognized, is that obviously we have a lot of veterans that are combat veterans now because of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. And so they're coming back, and there are some that are actually getting into the entrepreneurial realm and they're being extremely successful and leveraging those skills and those things they experienced in combat to become these successful entrepreneurs. There's certain core strengths that just carry right over into the entrepreneurial realm that an average veteran's probably not thinking, hey, these things match up. And so I decided to focus on combat veterans who have become successful entrepreneurs. And when I say successful, it may be an entrepreneur that's on his third venture, her third venture. The first two didn't work out, but you kept going, you persevered like everything else and became very successful. So, the Charlie Mike podcast, I've had amazing opportunities to interview people like Daniel Alaric of Gret Style. Everybody I'm pretty sure has, seen his clothing line that's out there. And some others that have some amazing nonprofits that are really helping veterans in non-pharmaceutical ways. And so those things really strike a chord to a lot of the veterans that listen to the show.
Awesome. And so how did you form Landmark Life Coaching?
Yeah, I was a veteran. I'm a veteran, I should say. I was in the military for 8 years. And, I really, after many years in the corporate world, I was really missing serving something of a higher purpose. And so I wanted to start my own entrepreneurial path where I was doing something that was serving my roots. Because I went in the military when I was 17, always knew that's what I wanted to do. And so, having served Desert Storm / Desert Shield as part of Operation Southern Watch, having served at the Pentagon, things like that, I was really exposed to a lot of phenomenal things. And I just see veterans that are seeming to struggle for various reasons transitioning back into the civilian world. And with my military experience and in my 20 plus years in the corporate world, currently serving as an executive for a federal aerospace engineering company, I figured that I would be able to provide value to that community. And so I started Landmark in July of 2015. And I coach others that are entrepreneurs, others that are looking to grow to that next level. But my true passion and my true drive is veterans in transition. I believe that there's very little reason that anybody should have to struggle to make that transition back. That, having a success partner to help take you through some different frames of reference to think about things really helps, because you're coming from a particular frame of reference. And without that other view, it really makes things seem very daunting. And when really, once you have another frame of reference, you're kind of like, I've been there, done that. That's just another way to say that. And so, so that's how Landmark came to be. I just decided I really wanted to do something again that was serving a higher purpose than my own career.
And I want to thank you for your service, of course, and also the value that you keep providing. So you're continuing to serve. And I read that somewhere that, or maybe it was actually in a podcast interview I think I did with Frank Shankwitz, and he was sharing that veterans are really unique because they are constantly looking for ways to continue to serve, right? So they served their time in the military. They want to continue to serve, outside of that and have that kind of continue on. So from an entrepreneurial, I guess, aspect, in this podcast, we always kind of go through what are some of the struggles that you faced or obstacles that you have faced that you could share with other listeners, especially a veteran, in this capacity on, if they want to start their own business, like what are some of the tips and advice or obstacles that you've encountered that you're willing to share with us?
Yeah, definitely. There's, it's some of these struggles or obstacles that we face are very common. We all tend to face those same obstacles at some point when we're an entrepreneur. So when I first started, as an entrepreneur, not having had my own business before, there was a lot that I didn't know. That was my biggest obstacle, was I kept running into things going, oh, I had no idea about that. And so then I would learn about it and get good at it. And then now that's just second nature to me, those things. But you will continue to run into those various things depending on your background, depending on your experience. With veterans, we have that ability to persevere and be persistent to overcome those obstacles and handle the stress that comes with that. And so, one of my biggest things was, hey, I'll put a website up. Somebody will find it. They'll want it, right? They'll want my services. Why not? Look at my bio. It's just amazing, right? And so after nobody knocking on my door for, let's just say, an extended period of time, I realized nobody knows me. Nobody in this realm, right? In this aspect. My family knows me for one thing. My company that I work for during the day, they know me for one thing. Friends know me for something, right? But nobody knows me as a coach that is really out there to help veterans in transition. And so it was like an aha moment that no, people aren't just going to find your website, and they're not just going to go there and be immediately impressed with your background, because theirs is probably just as impressive, if not more. Mm-hmm. And so I started to really have to dig into the social media aspect to get known in the veteran community. And that's been, a 2-year process so far, and it'll be an ongoing process. But I've met some amazing people through that different social media channels, and learning how to use all those tools. And then how do you make all those tools work together so that you're not just always in this app and this app and this app, and then your day's gone. And so those were some of the, early on challenges, and being able to craft that message that resonates with somebody, right? It's great that I want to do this, but what does that mean to the person on the other end? That mess has got to hit a personal chord for them to want to know you, want to like you, and want to trust you, right? And so those were all big learning curves. I mean, you think, oh, I've been doing this and I've been doing that for so long. Why wouldn't somebody want me to coach them? I've got a successful track record. And so those are, entrepreneurship is very humbling. Mm-hmm. And so you get to a point where you're like, oh, wow, this is really great. I really feel like I'm making some progress. And then you realize you've got to grow, you've got to pivot, you've got to do something different. And now all of a sudden you're very humbled into the learning stage again. And as an entrepreneur, you're always learning something new. You're always learning. And if you're who's not interested in learning that next thing, very, very daunting to overcome those things.
I agree.
And so, as I've, continued to grow, So as I continue to grow in me and grow the business and grow the value I can provide, I'm always learning these different things and reaching out to different people in my network to say, hey, how did you do this? What did you use? Well, some of it's just so I can shorten that learning curve and be a value added contributor to the community that much quicker.
So we didn't talk about this, but this is something that I'm noticing that's happening. So you feel when you start getting going and you start running up against these obstacles, sometimes you feel very alone in some of the struggles that you are overcoming in your entrepreneurial journey, right? Meaning, this is so frustrating. When you try to talk to somebody who's not a business owner, you're having a beer with your buddy and you're like, I couldn't get my QuickBooks to load properly, they look at you like you're nuts and they don't know what you're talking about. And so that's where, I mean, it can be a little lonely. So finding that network that understands, but can also help you, I agree, is key. And I think that's a really great segue. Something that you mentioned to me in our pre-call was creating original content. And I'd love to kick that around a little bit for us entrepreneurs, especially as we kind of go through these ebbs and flows of entrepreneurship and feeling highs and lows and the excitement. And then you're like banging your head against a wall. And what does it mean to you to create original content?
Yeah, original content, depending on what what service or product you're providing. For me, it's being able to get useful information out to those who may be interested in receiving coaching. In this case in particular, for veterans in transition, writing new content in relation to the issues that a veteran in transition may be facing, rather than just forwarding or regurgitating in my own words, something that's already been out there, right? Because people, once you start to study an area or look for help in an area, you start to see a lot of the same material. Mm-hmm. And it's people forwarding it, people sharing it, things like that. And that doesn't attract people to you as the forwarder or the sharer. What it does is it directs them to the original person that created the content. And so you always got to be providing something new, because people see this stuff and they want more, hopefully, right? That's the intent, is they want more of what you're creating, and it keeps them coming back for more, and it starts to build you as an expert in that area. And so, you got to be able to really be an understudy of that area, so that you can understand all the underlying things that people want to know something about. And one part for me that's very effective in creating the original content is relating it to something that's real in my life. I went through the transition. How did this apply to me? What were some of the challenges I faced? How did I overcome them? While you may not have the same challenges and you may not use that same method, you at least see that there is a way. And so, being able to have that personal relation within it also allows your potential clients to start to trust and like you prior to even a conversation.
And you could even say that supports why people have a podcast.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Podcasts are a great way for that.
Yeah. It's just another extension, long form, to get your message out there in a unique and original way. And that actually touches on a lot about what you were mentioning earlier about how important it is to continuously focus on learning, and then adapting that to, creating content that's going to validate you and can really put you as that expert within your industry. There are some available resources that, I want to kick around. We talk a little bit about resources in some of the other podcast episodes, but everybody uses different things when they first get started. And I mean, you can't share enough about when it comes to leveraging those available resources. So I'd love for you to share some of those that you recommend to other entrepreneurs in this space that we're in. What available resources, have been beneficial to you and that you would definitely recommend to others to look into?
Yeah, some of the really good things are, obviously in the social media, that's where everybody spends most of their time. But when you look at the gamut of social media tools out there that are available, it's almost mind-numbing. You have to really understand, where does your ideal client reside? What would they more than likely use? And that's where you want to be putting your content. But one thing I mentioned earlier is you don't want to always, say I publish a blog, it's out there once. But if you weren't on at 6 a.m. on Tuesday when I published that, you more than likely missed it because it got shuffled down through your news feed. And so you want to have a tool that allows you to take all that content you've created in the various social media channels and keep pushing it at various intervals throughout the day, throughout the week. And, that way it's continually being put out there in front of people. So, for example, I use LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook as my three main areas that I communicate on from a social perspective. But then I use a tool called Meet Edgar, where I load that material plus my podcast episodes all into Meet Edgar, and I set it up in a schedule, and it just pushes it out pushes it out. And, you got to be kind of savvy as to when you push out certain content. So if you're pushing out a video, you don't want to push it out at 6 a.m. and 4 p.m. when people are driving in the car, because obviously you hope they're not watching it at that time. But you might want to do it at noon when they're at lunch, but if you have an audio file, push it out in the morning and at night. So when they're sitting in their car in traffic like I do in DC and it's crazy for, 2 hours getting home, they got something to listen to. And so those are some very good tools to learn the ins and outs of and figure out how best to put content in it and what works, what doesn't work. And some of that's trial and error over time. But those are some of the greatest tools. One other thing that I found very helpful as an entrepreneur is I joined a mastermind. And this mastermind is 70, this one in particular is 70 other men, because that's the demographic that this mastermind serves. And we're all entrepreneurs, either as a side hustle, as the main thing. And we meet once a week. And in groups of 10, we talk about entrepreneurial things. What do you need help with? What are you doing? What tools are you using as an example? Things like that. We share resources. We share different insights that we've learned as entrepreneurs. So, while it's a cost, it is while it's an expense, but it's an investment.
Sure.
So, it's to me, I kind of relate to like investing in your 401k. It's no different, because the value you're going to get out of 69 other like-minded people that have more or less experience is just phenomenal.
How do you come across competitors in this mastermind group? Are there other folks that offer the same type of, coaching services that you do?
Yeah, that's funny. There are several coaches in the mastermind, but they are more business executive leadership type coaches. And so they're not specifically in the veteran space. And so in this particular one, there's not, but you certainly could, right? Because there are, for example, a few guys and women that have media companies that are in the mastermind, but they're willing to share certain things, and some are more focused on certain types of services than others. So we actually will push clients back and forth, right? Oh, you need to go see this person. And then what happens, it comes full circle. You end up getting 2 clients from them, right? Because people happen to come to them, but they're like, hey, this person's actually better for you in that area. And so it gives you a network of referral services as well.
Oh, I love it. So I feel like in the military spouse community, there are a lot of people who do marketing, people who do, advertising types of things. So we have to learn how to play in the same sandbox together. And there's nothing wrong with friendly competition. And in fact, like you said, you can learn from each other, but at the same time, everybody's kind of protecting their own, trade and their own services too. So I do love I love and enjoy my competitors and talking to them, but also recognizing and extending professional courtesy when those kind of lines get a little muddy. And I think that does come back, twofold when you can see that happen. So I appreciate you touching base on that with us, that topic of competition. So we're almost at the 20-minute mark. Flies by when you're having fun. Or when you're talking about business. As business people, we can talk about business all night, right?
Right.
I'd love for people to connect with you, Dwayne. I think you have a really great, unique podcast. So I'd love for people to find out how to connect with you and listen to that. And then also with your company. So please go ahead and share with us how to connect with you now that they've heard your kind of introduction on Drop and Give Me 20.
To connect on the podcast, if you go to charliemikepodcast.com, you'll be able to listen to all the episodes that have been released so far. I am currently booked out through the end of the year, which is a good thing. And so I just did, in fact, 2 interviews last night to process. So that's all going well. So there's some really great stories on there that people have told. In fact, like last night, I was saying I interviewed Daniel Lark from Grunt Style. Amazing $100 million plus business that he's built from the ground up, and he started with $1,200.
Wow.
And so, stories like that are on there, and it's inspiring and really powerful. And if you want to learn more about the life coaching, go to landmarklifecoaching.com, and you can contact me through the website. There's a contact page on there, and you can learn about the services that I do provide for coaching. I do various kinds of coaching, so it's a good thing to explore and see what's best for you as an individual. And as well as the Charlie Mike podcast site has a contact me page. And so you can use either of those resources to get in direct contact with me.
Awesome. And I know that you're really strong on LinkedIn because that's also how we connected. I love LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my number one favorite for professional networking. It is the bee's knees. Folks, Dwayne is on LinkedIn. It's DWAYNE Paro, Paro. You can also find him at Landmark Life Coaching. And you can also check him out on the podcast called Charlie Mike Podcast. So thank you so much, Dwayne, for coming on. Thank you for your service and your continued service within this community. We need you, and we need all the help we can get.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right. Take care. Thanks for listening to Drop and Give Me 20, brought to you by Germono Advertising Company in Norfolk, Virginia. Please visit our podcast in iTunes, click on subscribe, and leave us a review. Your support goes a long way. When you subscribe and leave reviews, it helps the guests on our show as well. Jump in and let us know what you think. You can also follow all of our guests on the Drop and Give Me 20 Facebook page. We have Instagram and Twitter. Those handles are Give Me 20 Podcast. I'm your host, Lindsey Germono, and I appreciate you listening to the show.